Bună ziua! Numele meu este Bianca Ghelbere și în ediția de astăzi îl avem alături de noi pe domnul profesor Williamson, artistul și regizorul american de operă, care în semestrul de iarnă 2019-2020 a colaborat cu Facultatea de Muzică și Teatru a Universității de Vest din Timișoara. Interpretându-l pe dictator în moment de criză, Williamson este protagonistul operei Romanian Revolution 989, The Opera, în regia lui Aaron Garbor, un proiect remarcabil organizat de clubul Rotary Opera cu scopul caritabil de a strânge fonduri pentru studenții de la facultate. Premiera spectacolului a avut loc în data de 15 decembrie, cu ocazia aniversării a 30 de ani de la Revoluție. Marți, pe 26 mai, Williamson a oferit un webinar pe tema punerii în scenă a figurii lui Nicolae Ceaușescu, dezvăluind tehnici actoricești, mistere pe care ni le va elabora astăzi. Hello, Professor Williamson. Thank you so much for offering us this opportunity to grab knowledge on what is happening behind the scenes of a complex opera staging. In the webinar on playing the role of Ceausescu in Romanian Revolution 989, the opera, you talked about your experience at the premiere in December in Timișoara, while also about preparing for the role. Can you tell our viewers how you first came in contact with this project and how you did the research for it?
Sure, yeah. So I first came in contact with this for the 25th anniversary of the Romanian Revolution from 1989. And the composer Aaron Garbor wrote a short one-act version of the opera for two characters. And in the first version of the opera, I played the student revolutionary hero. And we performed that in Virginia in 2015 and brought it to Romania at the invitation of the Opera Rotary and the University of the West in 2017. And that's how I began my relationship with my new friends in Romania. And so for that role, and for that version of the opera, I researched the Romanian Revolution, researched Ceausescu and the politics of the 20th century in Romania in a general sense, and tried to find out as many stories as I could. I had a Romanian friend named Nicolae Garbor, who was at the time the composer's wife. She's a pianist and also a graduate of UVT. So her brother was a student in the revolution in 1989. He was one of the first protesters and stayed close with the inner circle of student leaders. So I was able to hear some firsthand stories and, read articles and books, of course, looked online. Now, of course, it's so much easier for us to find information thanks to YouTube. So you can watch, all of these sometimes very horrible videos from 1989. But then there are also the very inspiring pictures as well, the pictures of everyone kneeling with the candles in Piazza Victoriei, singing the Padre Nostra, the Our Father, right? Sorry, the Romanian escaped me for a moment because we know it so well as Our Father. Even the Jews here in the United States know it. So anyway, so I talked with folks, and there was also a Romanian photographer who lives in Virginia in the United States where I live, who was present for the opera when it first premiered in 2015. So he shared some of his stories and some of his photographs. So there was a small but a real closely connected community. Several Americans who had visited Romania with Aaron and the composer and seen some of the places around Timișoara where the revolution unfolded. So then, of course, when I was cast to play Ceausescu in the December 2019 version, which was expanded into an almost 2-hour opera, maybe 90 minutes, 100 minutes, for the 30th anniversary of the revolution. So then I went back and reread some of the same sources that I had already looked at, but through the lens of trying to get inside the character of Ceausescu. And so I read some books that were specifically on his leadership and, many stories and quotations about him and his style and his upbringing. Read more in depth about the very complex relationship that he had with the people, because there were times where he was popular. Unlike, certain dictators in the 20th century, Ceausescu was popular for a time, standing up to the Soviet Union during the Prague Spring in 1968, for example. That I know that's an example that many people use to show that Ceausescu maybe wasn't as bad as everyone thought at the beginning. And then, of course, there's still this pocket or a portion of the population that believes it was better under Ceausescu, that there was more industry and the economy was better. So it's such a complicated part to play. I've never played a role like Ceausescu. Also, as a tenor in the opera, the tenors usually get to be the good guys. So it'd be like, one of the good actors that you like playing a bad guy for the first time,
You mentioned in the webinar not noticing much attention in American media regarding the happenings in Romania at the time of the revolution, at least not before the execution of Ceausescu couple, maybe due to the impact of the fall of Berlin's Wall. I'm sure you are aware of the huge amount of false information which has been shared. How were the events actually presented by the American journalists?
Well, I think my sense was that the Romanian Revolution was kind of lumped together with the other Eastern European revolution, in particular Germany and the Czech Republic, and then eventually the Soviet Union, so that there wasn't really a clear sense of Romania as its own its own world and its own story. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of popular U.S. culture, Romania, of course, is still the land of Transylvania and Dracula. I hate to say that, and I also want to play my part in sharing the wonderful Romanian culture and traditions, back home, of course, because I loved my experience and hope to return since I was sent home too early. But yes, I think there is a sense in the U.S., and I don't want to talk badly about my own country, but perhaps because our country is so big, and there are so many individual states, each of which is as large as many countries in Europe. I think a lot of Americans just don't have a sense of the world. They don't have a sense of Europe. It couldn't point to the Black Sea on a map. Really, a lot. I'm sorry to say that, but I think that is the case. And so, one of the things that was really interesting for me was to learn, along with Ceausescu in 20th century history, just how much Romania has been in the middle of competing factions and, in the middle of different war zones, how much its territory shifted, between the 19th and early 20th centuries, how it's been caught in the middle between East and West. I know that's a generalization, obviously, but how important Romania is, how strategic it is as a country geographically in the world, between Europe and Russia, between the Black Sea and Northern Europe. I have a much deeper appreciation for the country and its people and its importance. I hope that with COVID-19 and the globalization that happens in the 21st century with technology, that maybe some more conversations will happen and more Americans will make more Romanian friends.
Can you maybe tell us if it spotted any difference, not only in the infrastructure, but also in the reception of the audience, in the reaction of the public, in the atmosphere created in contrast to the one in the US?
Yeah, well, so in the US, the only performance of the full-length opera that we did was not a real performance, but just kind of a trial, a run-through to give the composer a chance to hear his piece before we started working on it in the United States. And so that was attended by a small audience, a mostly invited audience. But I was not surprised, unprepared. I was unprepared for how moved they were going to be, because I didn't know how many people would connect to the story. We were doing this, this opera in the US where, again, the history is not as familiar with a lot of folks. So I was unprepared for how affected they would be. At the end of the first act, the composer has a very haunting duet for the parents of the key family from whom the son who emerges as the student hero of the revolution, it's the family that he comes from, and he has in the opera he has twin sisters, and we know from Timișoara's stories that there were sisters who were killed on the opera house. If they weren't on the stairs, they were part of the protest. One of the many horrible stories. And so he has them as twins. So they sing together. They have voices that are parallel and similarly developed, and that's a smart move on his part. So the sisters really endear themselves to us. They're really a focus in the first act, and then they're shot near the end of the first act. And the parents sing this beautiful lament. And I was so unprepared for the fact in Virginia back in June, almost a year ago now, when we first tried this piece out, how many people were moved and just couldn't believe it. So I thought, all right, well, this probably will be very powerful in Romania. I don't know if people will come. It was an invitation only event. Because the revolution and Ceausescu and the history after the revolution and Ceausescu is muddy and confused and full of tension. That's at least the impression I got from talking with folks from literally every generation who wanted to talk about it. Those who were adults during the revolution, those who were young during the revolution, those who barely remember it, and those who weren't born, but who know their parents' version and the history, the stories. So we weren't prepared for how it would come together, because it came together very fast. One of the challenges that we faced was translating the opera from English to Romanian. And so that was accomplished with a team working many, many, many hours. The director and some of the staff of FMT made that happen. And so the opera didn't really come together until the week of the performance. So we were, of course, all nervous and not sure if it would come together, and it did. And the audience was full. I think I'd heard that they had to turn people away because there was no more room. There were folks standing. And at the end of the opera, during the national anthem, the audience stood up, and those, there were maybe 20 Americans in the audience, so I think most of them probably didn't know the words, but probably the rest of the audience sang along. And just that sense of community and the sense of historical significance of doing a piece that is based on history in the place where it happened. It's so incredibly special, so special for me to be a part of that. Being an outsider, coming in and being welcomed into the Timișoara community meant, of course, a lot to me, and I felt such a strong connection with my colleagues at the university and also the students. And it was special for me to be a faculty guest artist in the cast with a production that was 99% student involved. So that was very special. Yeah, I'll never forget it. There's also, to go back to your original question, there's something special about European style opera houses. the architecture, the acknowledgement of the classical design, the dome, the cupola at the top of the opera house is one of my favorite details. And that's something that a lot of our opera houses in the US, just, you know, we didn't privilege that style necessarily. So there are only a handful of those examples in the US. Philadelphia is one of the first that comes to mind. But anyway, so that it's just special being in a building like that, especially for someone like me who's been an opera lover and artist all his career. So yeah.
Thank you. And the future lies in shadow right now, but are you planning or working on something for the future, on a project?
Well, I hope to return to Timișoara. That's my hope. Certainly to Romania. Today, I would have been either driving or taking a train from Timișoara to Brașov to work on a new opera for a festival there at the University of Transylvania, led by one of my colleagues who studied in the United States. We were going to perform together. I'm so sad now that this was canceled, but we were going to work on a festival of opera devoted to women and the character of Violetta and La Traviata and different aspects of women in opera. And there was a new opera being written for the occasion, a short one, a 15-20-minute opera, not a big one. So that's very disappointing. I'd love to return and be able to see that project through. I had other projects. I was going to be helping to lead a film festival at UVT, Cine Cultur, with international relations. I was hoping to do a couple of other programs, including a premiere of a new work that I would perform myself as a gift for the community. So I hope to return, maybe in 2021. But of course, yeah, I always have projects getting ready to do another couple of online performances using Zoom to collaborate with a friend of mine who's a painter who will paint from his studio while I sing, and another one of our colleagues dances from his studio. And so I'll sing some songs. The painter will, paint a canvas that's either inspired by the music or the dance or both. And so it's, a way to use the technology and to try to fill the gap now while we can't have public performances. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for this interview.
Oh, kudrag.
I hope you'll be able to come back as soon as possible, because what you did here, it was so original, and I'm sure everybody hoping.
Mulțumesc, merci mult. Yeah, it was a pleasure for me. So I hope to come back too. Thank you.